control. What's the next step in Syria? Joining me now to discuss this, former State Department Senior Advisor Christian Whiton. He's also with D.C. International Advisory. Christian, it's good to see you this afternoon. This is a very tough thing going on in Syria because as the fighting continues, the bloodshed on both sides is escalating right now, and many would agree that the rebels are facing a tough uphill climb against the Syrian military, yet you point to some rebel success going on. So how have they achieved this, and does it help them get any closer to ending the regime of Bashar Assad?
Well, Kelly, I think you're right. They still face an uphill battle, but there have been some interesting points of progress in the last few hours. They've been able to sustain operations in Damascus and also in Aleppo, but also notably they took control of the state broadcaster, TV and radio, only temporarily, but in repressive places, repressive nations like Syria, if you can get control of the regime mouthpiece, that is actually psychologically very beneficial because it reinforces that the Assad regime does not have an infinite lifespan. So some progress amid what is still very much an uphill battle.
You know, you were talking about the psychological and symbolic image of gaining control of the mouthpiece, the government-controlled media there in Syria, but what kind of message would they be able to put out, the rebels, that is? Will they desire or promote a desire for freedom and democracy, or will they lean towards a possible Islamist point of view, like the Muslim Brotherhood or even al-Qaeda?
Right. Well, it depends entirely which voices you put on the air, and this is something we could be helping with, short of going to actual war. We have some tremendous capabilities at our disposal, civilian and military. Military has airplanes rigged out basically as flying TV and radio studios, typically used for psyops or psychological operations in military conflicts, trying to get troops on the other side to stop fighting, to surrender, to defect. But by putting voices from the rebels, by supporting the elements of the rebels that are least Islamist, you could potentially shape a post-Assad regime, or a post-Assad Syria, which we haven't really done yet.
So how does the United States do that? How does the United States do that real quickly?
Basically by identifying the source, the elements of the rebels that are not the Muslim Brotherhood and not al-Qaeda. And we know they're there. They're probably particularly among defectors from Assad's military. Those people are unlikely to be sympathetic to the Muslim Brotherhood. By favoring them, by selling them arms or providing them arms, that would be the best thing. But other aid, channeling it to them, cutting off the Muslim Brotherhood elements, and then that gives us some sort of handle on what happens. Because even when Assad goes, it doesn't necessarily mean this war is over.
Yeah, you're right about that, Christian. Real quickly before we go, China basically stating that the United States is responsible for this because the United States was actually promoting regime change. That's not true. It was actually the people in Syria themselves. Is that right?
That's right. This is something that China is probably very worried about because just as there's been an Arab Spring, there may very well be a Chinese Spring. Of course, all the China experts in Washington and all across the Pacific seem to refute that, but we know that Beijing is very worried that people will take matters into their own hands there. This is the Syrian people revolting against repressive rule. There's some unattractive elements, but there's some very attractive elements here, too.
Hey, Christian, we thank you, as always, for your perspective. Wish we could get into more. Again,